He didn't even look at her face. Daniel Zhao leaned toward his partners and spoke in rapid Mandarin, his voice low and sharp like a blade. "This girl probably thinks Shanghai is a type of noodle." His partners laughed. The woman standing beside the table, notepad in hand, braids pinned into a flawless bun, shoes worn but polished, didn't flinch. Her name was Zara Mitchell, 28 years old, former State Department interpreter, the youngest translator ever assigned to the U.S. consulate in Beijing. Tonight, she was just a waitress at the Meridian, San Francisco's most exclusive restaurant, invisible to men like Daniel Zhao. But Daniel Zhao had just made the most expensive mistake of his $12 billion career, because Zara Mitchell had understood every single word. The Meridian was the kind of restaurant where the wine list cost more than Zara's monthly rent. Crystal chandeliers, imported linen, a clientele that never checked prices. It was Friday, 9:00 p.m., and every table was full of executives, celebrities, and the kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. Zara had worked there for 8 months. To the patrons, she was part of the scenery. A black woman in a black uniform, natural hair braided and pinned into a clean professional bun, worn shoes hidden beneath wide-legged trousers. No one looked twice. "May I take your orders?" she asked in English, her voice soft and measured. Daniel Zhao finally looked at her, not at her face, at her hands, then at her shoes. He wrinkled his nose. Daniel Zhao was the founder of Novosphere Technologies, a semiconductor empire valued at $14 billion. At 53, he carried himself like a man who had never once been told no. Bespoke charcoal suit, Swiss timepiece, silver hair perfectly sculpted. He came to the Meridian every Friday to close deals and collect the small, quiet pleasure of feeling superior. "Bring the tasting menu," he said in English, the words slow and deliberate, as if English itself were a favor he was granting her. "And make sure the glasses are actually clean this time. Last week there was a smudge. Unacceptable." "Of course, sir," Zara said. She turned to leave. Daniel stopped her. "Wait." Zara stopped. Daniel leaned toward his 3 business partners and switched to Mandarin, his voice easy and unhurried. He smiled the way men smile when they believe they are completely safe. "Let us have a little fun. Watch this." He turned back to Zara and spoke in rapid, formal Shanghainese, a dialect layered with archaic expressions that even native Mandarin speakers struggle to follow. "You are so dull you probably think Beijing is something on a menu. Order the most expensive bottle in the cellar. I'll charge it to the restaurant and tell them you knocked it over. Let's see how long this one lasts." His partners laughed. One nearly choked on his water. Daniel waited for the reaction he always got, the confused blink, the nervous, apologetic smile, the quiet surrender of someone who doesn't understand and can't fight back. Zara didn't blink. She looked directly into his eyes for 3 full seconds. Something moved across her face, not confusion, not embarrassment. Something else entirely. Something Daniel could not name. Then she said simply, "Excuse me, sir," and walked away. Daniel frowned. That look bothered him for a moment. Then he pushed it aside. She was a waitress, a nobody. What could she possibly do? What Daniel Zhao did not know was that Zara Mitchell had just memorized every syllable he spoke. She understood Shanghainese better than most people born in Shanghai. Because 4 years ago, Zara Mitchell wasn't carrying a tray at a restaurant in San Francisco. She was whispering classified translations into the ear of the United States ambassador to China. Zara crossed the dining room with measured steps, her face a mask of absolute calm. But her hands were trembling by the time she pushed through the kitchen door. She leaned against the stainless steel counter and closed her eyes. "Zara." The voice belonged to Ruth then, the veteran bartender, a red-haired woman in her 50s who had taken Zara under her wing from day one. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Zara took a slow breath. Table 12. Ruth Ann's expression darkened. The tech billionaire. The one who complained the ice was too cold last week and tipped 4%. "That's him. What did he do?" Zara hesitated. How could she explain it? How could she describe what it felt like to stand beside a table while a man mapped out your humiliation in a language he was certain you couldn't understand? "Nothing I can't handle," she said. Ruth then studied her face for a long moment. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The look of someone who's decided something." Zara didn't answer. She straightened her apron, picked up her tray, and walked back to the dining room. What Ruth then didn't know, what no one at the Meridian knew, was who Zara Mitchell actually was. She had graduated from Georgetown at 21 with a double major in international relations and Chinese linguistics. At 22, she was recruited as a junior translator by the U.S. State Department. By 24, she was the ambassador's personal interpreter in high-level diplomatic meetings. She had translated conversations between heads of state. She had sat in rooms where trade sanctions were decided and treaties were quietly dismantled. She spoke Mandarin with native fluency across 4 regional dialects. And then the call came. Her grandmother, Celestine Mitchell, the woman who had raised Zara alone after her parents died in a highway accident when Zara was 7, had been diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's. "She can't be alone," the doctor said. "She doesn't recognize most people anymore, but she asks for you, Zara, every single day. You're the one thing she still remembers." Zara resigned that same week. She came home to San Francisco. She discovered that her grandmother's retirement fund barely covered medication. The insurance company denied the specialized clinic. The only way to keep Celestine out of a state institution was $4,800 a month in private care. Zara needed cash and she needed it fast. Diplomacy doesn't pay tips, so she folded her diplomas into the back of a closet, bought a black uniform, and became invisible. Zara. Marcus, the youngest waiter on the floor, appeared beside her looking nervous. "Howard's looking for you. Table 12 asked to speak with him and he doesn't look happy." Howard Briggs managed the Meridian, as though he had personally built it with his own hands. Zara found him near the bar, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Williams." He didn't look at her. "Mr. Zhao says you were rude." "I didn't say anything outside of protocol." "He says you stared at him aggressively." "I made eye contact while he was speaking. That's standard service." Howard finally looked at her. There was no sympathy in it. "Mr. Zhao accounts for 12% of this restaurant's monthly revenue. You account for nothing. If he says you were rude, you were rude. Understood?" Zara's fists tightened inside her apron pockets. "Understood." "Good, go back and apologize." "Apologize for what exactly?" "For whatever he needs you to apologize for." "That is how this works, Williams. Now go." Zara swallowed everything burning in her throat. $4,800 a month. Her grandmother in a rocking chair by the window, asking for her every morning. "Yes, sir." She walked back to table 12, each step a quiet negotiation between her pride and her reality. Daniel Zhao saw her coming. His face lit up. He said something in Mandarin to his partners and they chuckled. "Look, she's coming back to lower herself. I told you it would be easy." Zara stopped beside the table. "Mr. Zhao, I apologize if my service was unsatisfactory." Daniel smiled, that smile. "An apology isn't enough," he said in English, loud enough for the neighboring tables to go still. "Kneel." The dining room went quiet. "Excuse me," Zara said. "You heard me. Kneel and apologize properly." That is how servants show genuine respect. One of his partners shifted in his seat and murmured in Mandarin, "Daniel, this has gone too far." "Stay out of it," Daniel replied in the same language. She doesn't understand a word. I know what I'm doing. Zara looked at Daniel Zhao for a long, quiet moment. She thought about her grandmother in the rocking chair, about the bills stacked on the kitchen counter, about the medication schedule pinned above the stove. And she thought about something Celestine had told her once, long before the disease started stealing her words. Baby, you can bend, but you must never break. And when it is finally time to stand up in a way they will never forget. Zara did not kneel. Instead, she smiled. And it was not a smile of surrender. It was the smile of someone who had just decided to stop pretending. The silence inside the meridian was absolute. Forks froze in midair. Every conversation in the dining room died at once. Every eye moved to the black waitress, who had just refused to kneel in front of one of the most powerful men in the room. Daniel Zhao's expression shifted. That smile, whatever it was, unsettled him. It didn't look like fear. It didn't look like defiance either. It was something he couldn't locate in any category he knew. Didn't you hear me? His voice climbed. I said kneel. Zara tilted her head slightly to one side. When she spoke, it was not in English. It was Mandarin. Fluid, precise, refined, the accent of someone who had learned the language not in a classroom but in the corridors of power in Beijing. Mr. Zhao, she said, each syllable perfectly placed. I heard everything you said tonight, every word, from the moment you sat down. The color left Daniel's face so quickly it was visible from across the room. You said I probably can't spell my own name. You said people like me are only good for carrying plates. You said you were going to order the most expensive wine in the cellar, blame me for spilling it, and have me fired. For entertainment. One of his partners dropped his fork. The clang rang out through the silent room like a struck bell. Zara continued, her voice calm and carrying. You also said 20 minutes ago, when you believed I was out of earshot, that Mr. Leung should falsify the emissions data for the Shenzhen facility before Tuesday's audit, because the American inspector would never understand the documents. Daniel shot to his feet so fast his chair toppled behind him. Who are you? He hissed in Mandarin. Who sent you here? No one sent me, Mr. Zhao. Zara met his eyes without blinking. I'm a waitress who spent 4 years as a senior interpreter for the U.S. State Department. I worked at the consulate in Beijing. I translated negotiations between the ambassador and members of the Politburo. I sat in closed sessions where the terms of international trade agreements were decided word by word. She took one step forward. He took one step back. I speak 4 dialects of Mandarin, Mr. Zhao, including the Shanghainese dialect you used to insult me this evening. It's a beautiful dialect. You speak it with the accent of someone who grew up in the Pudong district. Upper middle class, I would guess. Not quite the old money you like to suggest. A ripple moved through the dining room. Phones were rising everywhere, screens glowing, recording every second. This is absurd, Daniel said, switching to English, grasping for the authority he could feel dissolving around him. This woman is lying. She is a fraud. I will have this restaurant shut down. You're welcome to try, Zara said, still in Mandarin. But first, you may want to speak with the woman at table 9. Daniel turned. At table 9, an elderly Chinese woman sat alone with a cup of tea. White hair drawn into an elegant bun. Posture immaculate, eyes sharp and dark as obsidian, watching the scene with complete stillness. That is Mrs. Song Mei Fang, Zara said, founder of Song Capital Group, second largest individual shareholder in Novosphere Technologies, the woman you have spent 4 months courting for the Southeast Asia infrastructure contract. Daniel went the color of paper. Mrs. Song speaks English fluently, Zara continued. She prefers to dine in silence and observe. She told me that herself when she placed her order 90 minutes ago. She also told me she was here tonight to assess your character before committing her signature. Mrs. Song rose from her chair. She crossed the dining room with the unhurried composure of a woman who has never needed to rush, because the world has learned to wait for her. When she reached Daniel's table, she spoke in Mandarin, not to the room but directly to him. "I started with nothing," she said. "I was 14 years old selling vegetables in a market in Chengdu. I cleaned offices. I washed floors. I was spoken to the way you spoke to this young woman tonight, as though I were furniture, as though I had no interior life worth acknowledging." She looked at Zara, then back at Daniel. "This woman has more dignity in a single breath than you have accumulated in a lifetime of wealth, Mr. Zhao. The contract is cancelled. Permanently. And tomorrow morning I will contact every member of your board of directors and describe in precise detail what I witnessed in this room tonight." "Mrs. Song, please." "I am not finished." Her voice was quiet steel. "You also discussed falsifying environmental compliance records. I have close personal relationships with 3 senior officials at the Environmental Protection Agency. I think they will find that conversation very instructive." Daniel looked around the room. His partners had physically leaned away from him, putting visible distance between themselves and the disaster unfolding beside them. The other diners watched with open disgust. Dozens of phones were still recording. In under 6 minutes, he had gone from the most powerful person in the room to the most exposed. "This is not over," Daniel said, his voice shaking now. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Zara said. "A man who needs to make others feel small so he can feel tall. A man who measures a person's worth by the condition of their shoes. A man so accustomed to being the most important person in every room that he forgot the most basic rule." She held his gaze. "Never underestimate someone simply because they're wearing an apron." Daniel Zhao said nothing. He grabbed his jacket from the fallen chair and walked to the exit, shoulder-checking a busboy on his way through. The front door of the Meridian slammed behind him with a finality that echoed off the walls. No one followed him. 3 seconds of silence. Then one person started clapping, then another, and another. And then the entire dining room rose to its feet, and the sound filled the restaurant like something that had been waiting a long time to come out. Zara wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Mrs. Song, who had taken both of her hands. "You were at the consulate in Beijing?" Mrs. Song asked softly in Mandarin. "Yes, ma'am, 4 years." "Why did you leave?" Zara swallowed. "My grandmother, she's ill. She needed me home." Mrs. Song studied Zara's face for a long, careful moment. Then something in her expression shifted. The severity gentled into something almost maternal. "Come to my office Monday morning," she said. "The Song Capitol Building, 38th floor, Embarcadero Center. I need someone with your mind and your backbone." She pressed a card into Zara's hand. "Bring your grandmother if you like. I have a driver who can collect you both. And my son-in-law is a neurologist at UCSF, Alzheimer. S is his specialty." Zara looked at the card, then at the woman in front of her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" "Mrs. Song squeezed her hands. "Because 60 years ago I was you, a girl everyone had already decided didn't matter, and someone chose to see me anyway." She held Zara's gaze. "Now it is my turn." Sunday morning came through the window of the Oakland apartment in long golden stripes across the carpet. The smell of banana pancakes, Celestine's recipe, memorized before the disease could take it, drifted through the rooms. Zara sat on the edge of her bed holding Mrs. Song's card. She had looked at it more times than she could count. Song Capital Group, Director of International Relations, Asia Pacific. The salary listed on the offer letter that had arrived Saturday morning was $180,000 a year, with full dependent health coverage and access to a network of medical specialists Zara had never imagined being able to afford. But it wasn't the number that kept drawing her eyes back to the card. It was the possibility of becoming herself again. Zara. The voice came from the hallway, fragile, searching, but unmistakably hers. Zara tucked the card into her pocket and went to the living room. Her grandmother, Celestine Mitchell, was sitting in the rocking chair by the window. At 81, she seemed smaller every time Zara looked. The disease had taken so much names, faces, years, but today her eyes were clear. One of the good days. Come here, baby. Celestine extended her hand, the same hand that had braided Zara's hair the morning of her first day of school, the same hand that had held hers at her parents' funeral, the same hand that had waved from the curb the day Zara left for Beijing. Zara knelt beside the chair and held it. "You look different today," Celestine said, studying her face. "You look lighter." Zara smiled. "Something happened, Grandma, something good, I think." "Tell me." Zara told her not everything, not the ugliest parts, but she told her about Mrs. Song, about the offer, about the possibility of using her mind and her languages in a room that deserved them. Celestine listened without interrupting. When Zara finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember what I told you the day you left for China?" she asked. "You said fly high, but don't forget where the ground is. And when you came back, when you gave everything up to come home to me, do you remember what I said?" Zara felt her eyes sting. "You said I didn't have to do that. And you said you did." Celestine squeezed her hand. "I never asked you to stop flying, baby. I just needed you close while I figured out how to land." A tear ran down Zara's face. "You sacrificed too much for a stubborn old woman." "Grandma, don't. Let me finish." Celestine's eyes were fierce with a sudden clarity. "You took care of me. Now you take care of yourself. Accept this job, go back to who you are." She touched her own chest. "I'll be right here, I always am." She paused. "And maybe sometimes you can take me to see that fancy office. I want to meet this Chinese lady who had the good sense to see my granddaughter." Zara laughed through her tears. She stood up and pulled her grandmother into her arms, feeling the smallness of her, the lavender scent, the warmth that had never once changed. "I love you, Grandma." "I know, baby. I love you too. Even on the days I can't remember my own name, I never forget that." At 9:00 a.m. Monday, Zara stepped out of the elevator on the 38th floor of the Embarcadero Center. She wore a navy dress purchased 3 years ago at a thrift store for an interview that was canceled. The shoes were the same ones she had worn at the Meridian, worn down at the heel, but polished to a shine. Mrs. Song met her personally at the glass door. "You came," she said in Mandarin. "I came," Zara replied in the same language. "Good, we have a great deal of work." Mrs. Song walked her through the office, past walls of windows overlooking the bay. Novosphere has been in crisis since Friday. The videos spread overnight. 2 board members have already resigned. Daniel Zhao is under federal investigation for environmental fraud. Zara stopped walking. Federal investigation. The EPA inspector Daniel, referred to as an idiot, saw the footage. Mrs. Song's expression remained dry. He found the description motivating. She continued down the hall. Daniel Zhao learned a lesson that most powerful men take too long to learn. Be careful what you say in front of people you've already decided don't matter. You never know what they understand. They reached a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. The Golden Gate Bridge caught the morning light in the distance. "This is your office," Mrs. Song said. "Your first assignment is to lead trade negotiations with Singapore's Ministry of Commerce. They want a framework agreement by the end of the month. Zara looked at the room, at the view, at the woman who had handed her back something she thought she'd left behind for good. Mrs. Song, why me? You could have anyone. Mrs. Song walked to the window and stood quietly for a moment, looking at the city below. When I was 17, she said, I worked as a hotel cleaner in Hong Kong. A guest accused me of stealing a watch he had simply misplaced. The manager fired me without asking a single question. No one wanted my side of it. No one thought it mattered. She turned. I built Song Capital over 50 years so that I would never again be treated as though I were invisible. And for 50 years, I have looked for people who know what that invisibility feels like. Because those are the people who understand what is actually worth protecting. She placed a hand on Zara's shoulder. You could have knelt. You could have kept your head down and kept your job. You chose your dignity instead. That is not something I can train into a person. That is who you already are. Zara couldn't find the words. They were somewhere behind the tightness in her throat. Now, said Mrs. Song, returning to business with brisk efficiency. We have a call with Singapore in 19 minutes. I hope your formal Mandarin is